History and the 21st African American Cultural Celebration. Our presenter, William Landis, will begin in just a moment, but we want to start with a few notes. Remember to ask questions in the chat, and we'll do our best to respond to them and share with our presenter. Please note that our presenters and staff and off-camera crew are masked for the safety of everyone. We want to thank the following sponsors of the North Carolina Museum of History Foundation for helping to make this event possible.
Good afternoon and welcome back. If you are joining us again, we have with us today William Landis. He is a North Carolina Extension Agent with Franklin and Warren counties. William Landis is a North Carolina Extension Agent, and he works with small farmers in Franklin and Warren counties to develop their enterprises and make them more efficient and profitable. So let's learn a little bit more about what William does. Hey, William.
Hey, how y'all doing? So again, thank you for the introduction. My name is William Landis. I now work in Franklin County for Cooperative Extension, working under North Carolina A&T State University for North Carolina Cooperative Extension. And turns out quite a few people don't know a lot about North Carolina Cooperative Extension. Generally, what we do, we work with the two land-grant universities, North Carolina A&T State University and North Carolina State University, to bring that research-based information down to the citizens of North Carolina and give them an opportunity to use that information to make better decisions. So if we, in a few minutes, we get into the PowerPoint. But so they brought me in as talk in regards to environmental justice, and there was a big struggle with that. Wait for the PowerPoint to get up. There we go. And go to that next slide whenever you're ready. So again, they brought me in to talk in regards to environmental justice, and I spent a couple of weeks just running around talking to people that were hired that had been in cooperative extension for longer than I've been alive, talking about, well, what does extension do in regards to environmental justice? How can I speak on the subject of environmental justice coming from an extension agent? And most of them said, oh, we don't know. We don't do environmental justice. And I really wanted to speak on this because, as I told you, I started my extension career off in Warren County, and that's actually where the environmental justice movement began, in Warren County, with the Warren County PCB duck protest. And I have a picture of that on that slide. And that was in 1982. You see the pictures, and you really don't realize how that wasn't that long ago. That's where the whole concept of environmental justice started, at that kind of people taking it into their hands to protect their communities and protect their environment. If you go on to the next slide. So it was a struggle to figure out what does extension actually do. So I have on here what the actual mission of extension is. Cooperative extension provides research-based information to North Carolinians so that they can make decisions to improve their communities and their lives. And we do this in 4 main areas. We think agriculture, which I work in. That's where most people that utilize our services, they're usually farmers or natural resource. They have something to do in those fields. Food and nutrition. So a lot of people remember canning classes. Mm-hmm. That's through us. Youth and development. So when I mentioned cooperative extension, one of the main things people bring up is 4-H. You heard of 4-H?
Yep, I was a 4-H'er when I was little.
There we go. That's what, that's one of our main programs everybody knows at Clover. And the next one is community development. One of the newer areas, community development. Next slide. So the mission and where it ties in a great deal to environmental. Well, I guess we skipped one slide. Well, probably didn't put it on there. Um, Transform science into everyday solutions for North Carolinians through programs and partnerships focused on agriculture, food, health, and nutrition, and forest use development. And how does that tie into environmental justice? I had trouble finding that. Next slide. Didn't put that slide in there. But we go back and look at the definition of what is environmental justice, and it's basically, if I remember correctly, from the EPA definition, is local communities, social disadvantaged people having the right to make decisions and influence policy, regulations, rules, and enforcements of environmental laws in their communities, no matter what their socioeconomic background is. And comparing it to what the mission of Extension is, and also more in depth, North Carolina A&T State University Extension, which deals with um, socioeconomic disadvantaged populations, it ties in perfectly with it without actually saying it out loud. Next slide. So the question is, well, where are these extension offices at? How do I get involved with this? Well, extension offices are in all 100 counties in North Carolina, plus the Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians. On this map is a program they were doing with giving out seed kits during COVID. One of the big issues during COVID-19 were, well, how the food systems collapsed, and what do we do, buddy? And well, how about we give kids seeds and allow them to grow their own food? We did this in Franklin County, and you see all the other counties in North Carolina where this program was going on. So this one doesn't show it was in every county, but there is an extension office in every county in North Carolina that you should contact. Next slide. So how did this start? And I'd like to tie this a little bit into Black History Month. So you look at the Morrill Act of 1862. There was a guy in Vermont named Senator Justin Morrill. He had this whole idea is, well, the states spend all this money on large state universities where we send these kids to go learn Greek, Latin, and all this other medicine we really don't need. How can the common man utilize that knowledge and that information? What about the information and stuff that everybody else, that the common man needs? So he had this whole concept, we're going to fund these universities, every state in the United States, and we're going to sort of using the things that people from, every walk of life can utilize that are going to improve the quality of life in the state. So he made an act that said that we're going to start universities that benefit the agricultural and mechanical arts. In 1862, they passed that law. In 1887, North Carolina State University was founded in Raleigh, North Carolina. And so I guess he was just sitting around one day, and he just got to thinking, it's like, well, they're Black people, recently freed from slavery. And well, they could utilize these schools a lot as well. But how are we going to get them to, in the southern states, everything's still segregated quite a bit. They can't go to these schools. So what do we do? Well, let's make a Morrill Act of 1890 that founds 1890 land grant universities for African American students. If they are if the universities are segregated, they can start one for African American students. And 1891 is when North Carolina A&T State University was founded, the second land grant university in North Carolina. Next slide. And well, I'm going to go back to the last slide for a second. There's also the Land Grant Act of 1994 that founded universities for Native American students, and those are mostly in the western states, but just kind of want to add that caveat in there as well. Next slide. So we understand how the land grant universities were formed. So what we're going to do, we're going to take a look at the Smith-Cleaver Act of 1914. So everybody's heard of George Washington Carver, all the good work he did down at Tuskegee University, and but nobody really ties that into what how that work influenced extension. You look on that picture on the top left. That's called the Jessup wagon, and it was what Booker T. George Washington Carver used to basically go out, take his experiments out into rural Alabama and educate farmers, disadvantaged farmers, on the research that he was doing. And this was in 1906, and he hired a guy named T.M. Campbell to help him out some. And in 1914, they started the Smith-Lever Act, and that said, well, we want everybody doing this kind of work, every university, every land-grant university doing this kind of work. And T.M. Campbell was actually became the very first extension agent in the United States, based on the work he did with George Washington Carver. Next slide. So, next question: what has extension done? Well, what has been accomplished as a result of the Smith-Lever Act, and what has been accomplished? What has extension done? So the next, we're going to base in North Carolina. One of the things I want to take a look at is this guy, Dr. Benjamin Kilgore, and Pine State Milk. Who's heard of Pine State Milk? I'm sure everybody has. You look up, talk to people that have been in North Carolina for years. Oh, I love Pine State Milk and Pine State ice cream. It's the best ice cream you ever had. Well, it was actually started by one of the very first directors of extension in North Carolina, Dr. Benjamin Kilgore, who was also the dean of North Carolina State University, dean of agriculture at North Carolina State University. It was actually a dairy cooperative for dairy farmers in North Carolina, and it was founded as a way to supply milk for a place called Camp Polk, which was a military base in Raleigh, North Carolina, during World War I. So he got a group of dairy farmers together and said, well, the military base needs milk, so you guys can produce it, and we're going to process it, and we're going to deliver it there for you. Everybody's going to make money. Soldiers going to drink milk. Everybody's going to be happy. It's going to be a good day. And from that, from Camp Polk closes after World War I, and they started providing milk for everyone throughout the state of North Carolina, and bringing in more farmers to provide that milk. And Pine State became the legendary business that it became known as. Next slide. So from the North Carolina A&T side, there was a guy named Dr. Dan Lyons, an administrator at North Carolina A&T State University. He started this thing called Small Farms Week in 1986. And that picture on the right is a picture of him giving it to a gentleman named Charles Sneed in Franklin County, who was a small farmer year, I believe, in 1989 or 1990, one of the two. And it's been a big deal for years. Towards the last week in March, Small Farms Week is every year. And this year, it is going to be on March 21st. And it's going to start in Franklin County. It's going to go that whole week. So do some research. You want to join in on that, learn about the contribution of small farmers in North Carolina. Come check that out. We'd love to have you. There are actually satellite sites in a lot of counties throughout North Carolina. So you want to check that out, please do. Next slide. So I just want to break down some of the work that I've done in extension. So this is McFetridge Family Farms, and one of the big things that's been going on in agriculture among small farms and farmers all together is allowing people to produce industrial hemp in North Carolina. One of the challenges with that is, well, how do we process it? How do we store it? How to prepare for market? All that good stuff, infrastructure is not there. So taking one of my farmers on a trip to A&T, they had designed a processing unit, a very cheap drying unit that you could build using only a shipping container, some walls, and some other stuff to dehumidifier to get to dry the hemp out and make it easier to store and to process to CBD, whatever else you want to process it to. And so she liked the idea so much that she got some grant funding and she built one herself on her own property. And that is a picture on the right, and that's on the inside of it. of that shipping container. I thought it was very impressive. Next slide. This is Steve and Elkie McCalla of Rocky Ridge Farms, and what they're doing, they had this great idea of creating a geothermal greenhouse. One of the challenges of farming is it's not all about just growing things. There are a lot of expenses that go into it, so you have to find a way to cut those costs anywhere you can to make it profitable. So what they did, instead of having a regular greenhouse with the electricity coming off the grid, they said, how can we cool this thing using the natural temperature of the earth? So they have the concept of a geothermal greenhouse. So what that greenhouse does, it puts those corrugated pipes underground, and it sucks air out of the greenhouse, and it runs it underground. And while that air is underground going through all those pipes, that temperature of the ground changes it to the air in those pipes to that temperature. And when it sucks it back into the greenhouse, after going through all those feet of pipe, the temperature is at the ground temperature, so it keeps it at the normal temperature of the ground. So you don't have to worry about cooling and heating it. All you have to do is to worry about the cost of maybe the electricity for the lights and the electricity of the fans, which is a lot cheaper than air conditioning and a heater. Next slide. This is Dean's Greens, also in Franklin County, one of the farmers I work with. He's well, this is one of the most interesting ones I've worked on. He raised microgreens. So you go to a very big fancy restaurant, you're going to see those little, bean sprouts on the side of it and stuff like that. Well, those are very expensive. Mm-hmm. One of the reasons is there are not a lot of farmers that grow it, and again, the name of the game for small farmers is how can I make the most money using the smallest bit of land, putting the least amount of inputs into it as cheap as possible with high profit margins. Microgreens is one of the better ways to do that. So what he did was found a way to grow microgreens on the inside of an old storage shed, using a few shelves and some lights. And it takes 2 or 3 weeks to grow them to the size that you need them to. And he just delivered a whole flats to a restaurant in the Raleigh-Durham area. So he did an incredible job of producing something, a high-value crop, in a rural area and reaching to those markets in Raleigh and Durham. Next slide. This is May Farms from Franklin County. They raise cows, pigs on grass, and they actually sell at the farmers market in Raleigh. They have that nice booth that looks like a barn. I'm pretty, if you've been there, you've seen them. Very good products. Well, last year they won Small Farm of the Year, and so they're going to be starting the Small Farm of the Year program on March 21st in Franklin County. They're very excited about winning it. They deserve it. They did a lot of good work during COVID, making sure that everybody had a good source of healthy protein while the rest of the supply chain was, having a connection. They were still running. They were still going. Next slide. Well, those are some resources I pulled for. Next slide. Okay. Well, I guess the main takeaway is while the idea of extension is not environmental justice in completely, the whole concept is that we find solutions. We bring that research-based information to you so you can make the decision to improve your lives, improve your communities, and we find solutions. That's what we do. You have any questions about anything? So I've had some pretty interesting questions regarding crop circles. Told you guys I was going to mention that in there at some point. Spraying, how do you solve this problem? How do you solve that problem? I've got snakes in my basement. What do? I don't know. So we told them who to call to get rid of those snakes, and it was taken care of. Any question you have, give us a call. We'll find a solution for you.
And extension agents are in every county in North Carolina,
Yeah,
so give a call. So I have a few questions here for you. I'm wondering, I want to check in first to see if there are any other questions. So just to I have just a few questions that we'll start with, and then we can check in with the chat to see if there's any there. What led you to become an extension agent?
Um, so in high school, I took some FFA classes. I enjoyed working outside, getting my hands dirty. So I took those FFA classes, and I love getting out of class, going on trips,
Mhm.
love working in the greenhouse. And I said, well, there's a way I could do this, as a job. They said, yeah, go to A&T or NC State. And I said, I like A&T.
Yeah.
I like homecoming. And so I went there, and I enjoyed homecoming. And I took those agriculture classes. I enjoyed them. I got a job on the university farm, and I enjoyed that doing research. I enjoyed that thoroughly. Um, had some internships with Extension, and really enjoyed that. And after I graduated, got a master's degree. After working on farms some more, my mother said, "Well, you gotta go get a real job, man. You can't work on the farm forever." And I said, "I can't. Hold my beer, mom." And a few years after I graduated, I did some time in the military and did some time as a high school agriculture teacher in Robeson County. And I got that job working in extension in Warren and Franklin County, both two shared counties. I'm in Franklin County full time now.
Wow. I want to, if you could describe a little bit more about the university farm. So there are university farms at North Carolina A&T. What is that farm like there?
Well, there are university farms in North Carolina A&T and North Carolina State. The one and of course there are research farms connected to Extension and the two universities throughout the state of North Carolina. There's one in Oxford that was dedicated to tobacco for years.
Yeah.
There's one in Montgomery County and a lot of other places I really can't name right now. But the two main university farms are on A&T and North Carolina State. And at North Carolina A&T, they had a poultry section, dairy section, beef cattle, equine, horticulture, and it was the whole concept of A&T is work with small farmers and socially disadvantaged farmers. So they were trying to find ways, how do we research the things that are going to be profitable and environmentally safe for small farmers. And that was the whole purpose. So I was working with a guy, had the pleasure of working with a guy, Dr. Adasi, that worked in agroforestry, which finds a way to tie in raising tree crops along with other crops together. So you had concepts like silvopasture, where you could grow trees and have cows or other livestock under them. You had alley cropping, where you had two lines of trees going down, and right in the middle of it, you had you were growing a crop. So ways to tie in crops with tree production. And then there was I worked with Dr. Jakai, who was an entomologist, and he worked on this concept called integrated pest management. So we were doing research on insects that attack certain crops and applying pesticides. One of the main things that happen when you apply pesticides is that insects find a way to develop resistance to those pesticides. So we would mix different pesticides together and change it on a certain basis to see if that will slow down the insect's ability to build a resistance to it. And so that was some of the research we did. And there's a lot of other great research going on there right now. High tunnel season extension work. One of the main challenges in North Carolina is a short growing season that we have. During these cold months, it kills everything. So we use these things called high tunnels. You've heard of a greenhouse. Basically, a high tunnel is a greenhouse that doesn't have any fans or heat, but it's able to protect the crops that grow inside of it. So it gives those farmers time to keep on producing those crops on the inside. And if you're able to grow something that's other farmers aren't able to do because they're growing outside and it's too cold to, you're able to get a premium price, so you're able to make more money.
I've seen those now, like traveling out to the coast, and I know exactly, I had no idea what they were, but that does make sense.
Right.
So to hear more about being an extension agent, what is the mission of an extension agent, and how do you hope to, how are you able to help people, or how do you help people as an extension agent?
Well, back to the mission of the extension, basically bringing down a research-based information to the people that need it so they can make educated decisions and improve their lives or any operation business they may be doing. So best thing is somebody comes to you and asks you a question, you're able to find a solution by, either contacting the university and say, we have this problem, how do we solve it? Or doing a research yourself. And if you don't have an answer for them, you're able to send them to the right person that does have an answer. So being that great resource of in the community, you're basically a brain trust within the community, like an unbiased brain trust in the community that sends unbiased information to the people that need it.
That's great. So what advice would you give to anyone who's interested in beginning to grow food for themselves and others?
First step, go for it. Second step, contact Extension. I guess one of the things everybody does is said, oh, well, I Googled it. And there are a lot of good resources on the internet, don't knock those at all. But, everybody see, in terms of hemp, for example, everybody says, well, I can make $1 million per acre growing hemp and stuff like that. You got to look at stuff with a grain of salt. Don't take it at face value. Keep on doing your research. Even if you don't contact Extension, what I suggest that you do, keep on looking at the options out there. Don't just trust it. Keep on doing that research.
What are some of the resources available at Extension for people who are looking to grow their own food?
Great. So one of the things I actually did yesterday, we have this thing called soil testing. You can come there, get a box, get a form, and you can come out there, test your soil. And what it does, it tests your soil for the pH, the nutrients in the soil, and what it does, you can write down what you want to grow out there, and it'll tell you the amendments that you need to change the soil, to amend the soil to what you to get it to the place that you need to grow that successfully. So you might need to add lime to raise the pH some. You're going to need to add fertilizers with a certain concentrations of nitrogen, phosphorus, or potassium, which are the macronutrients. And you might also need those micronutrients, and it analyzes for that. Things zinc, boron, molybdenum, all those good things, or calcium, magnesium, or sulfur. So yeah, we have that, and there's also we do some waste testing. We have animals, all depending on the expertise that's your particular office. I've actually gone out there and helped deliver pigs.
Wow.
I've helped. You do. I like working with the plants. I try to stay away from the animals. I get pulled into that all the time. It's crazy. Anything you have, any questions you have in regards to animals or plants, we're your people, or youth development, or food, we're your people.
I'm going to stick with my little small office plants, and we're going to focus on growing those, because even the thought of the things that you mentioned that are in the soil that you do have to consider in order to grow, I guess, healthy crops and to keep them viable year after year, that's an important thing to think about. So I know people who are starting small farms and community gardens, so they can absolutely should be reaching out to an extension.
And when you mentioned growing it year after year, there's another thing we do, nematode testing. There's kind of like little bug things, that live in the soil called nematodes, and it can affect various crops. But keep on planting there, so it builds up that nematode load in there, and you won't be able to grow that crop in there.
That's what happens.
So
I've heard,
we have tests there that test those nematodes.
Nematodes.
Yes.
I knew that eventually crops will not be able to grow. Never knew the reason why. So it's the nematodes that are there.
And we do animal waste testing. So you go, and the lab is actually here in Raleigh on Reedy Creek Road. We bring it all from all over state of North Carolina to that lab. And there are private labs, but it's pretty cheap with us.
Okay.
So, but yeah, so a lot of times what livestock producers do, they spread the waste that the animals produce onto crop fields. And because it's a very good fertilizer, there are certain concentrations of nitrogen and phosphorus in there. And they use the fertilizer so they know how much the percentage of it is. And when they spread it, and on the concept of environmental justice, too much nitrogen and the soil's not able to hold it, or the plants are able to suck it up, it gets to the water. And nitrogen, there are issues with nitrogen getting into groundwater. There's a thing called hypoxia and eutrophication, when too much water gets into the nitrogen gets into the water and it goes into the ocean, and you get these things called dead zones because all the nitrogen goes in there, and like I said, it's a fertilizer. All the algae starts growing because they have a huge form of nitrogen, and they start doing photosynthesis. They take the oxygen out of the water, and it kills the fish. So you have these kill zones. So we try to limit the amount of nitrogen. That's a lot of the work we do with environmentalism and extension, decrease the amount of nitrogen that farmers use.
And I can't help but think of how that impacts rural, poorer country or towns and places where people live that are impacted by those runoffs from those bigger farms. So the work that you do to help prevent and to regulate, to make sure and protect those communities that are in those danger areas because of water consumption. You mentioned groundwater.
Right.
So this also kind of leads into the next question of why is it important to support Black farmers and how can people do so?
Well, it's very important to support Black farmers. Agriculture in the Black community is a very long legacy. One of the things that inspired me to go into it was both my parents grew up on farms. My dad grew up in Greenville County. I love going out there playing in the trees and all that good stuff, and growing gardens. And you look at the importance that plays in our legacy in North Carolina overall, the legacy of Black farmers, and the issues we see in Black land loss. Everybody knows that land is an asset, but if you're keeping the land and you're not making it productive, is it really an asset? It becomes more of a liability because all you're doing is paying taxes on it and keeping it. If you're not producing anything on it, then you're wasting it. And one of the best ways to make land productive is in agriculture, whether you have cattle on it, you're selling hunting leases on it, or you're growing crops or just raising trees on it. You have to find a way to make it productive, and one of the best ways to do that is with agriculture production.
And do you know of any, I guess, Black farmers or their products or that we can support, or how can we go about supporting those specific Black farmers that are local and within North Carolina?
Well, one of the organizations I work with out of Pittsburgh, North Carolina, is the Rafi Rural Advancement Foundation International. They have this thing called the Farmers of Color Network. They do some great work. So if you're looking for a list of people, they probably have it. They do a lot of good work with those people. In Raleigh in particular, there's a store called the Black Farmers Food Hub that does the best to buy from strictly Black farmers, and it's in Southeast Raleigh.
Thank you.
Very good products, ran by a guy. I think he's presenting here today, Demetrius Hunter.
Okay.
There's also Black Cotton, a gentleman by the name of Julius Tillery. Julius Tillery. He raises cotton. He comes from a long line of cotton producers, and he's trying to change the concept of how Black people see cotton, because you think slavery, but he comes from a long line of cotton producers, and they're able to. He's trying to change that narrative. He's doing some good work.
Wow.
He does some design work, all that good stuff. Also, let's see. There's Hempfinity. So if you're into all CBD, like that CBD stuff, there's a guy in Warren County. That's another Century Farm, and he's come back to the farm and started raising hemp, and has his own line of CBD products, Hempfinity. There's Pharmacy. She has a YouTube channel. She does some good stuff raising herbs. There are plenty of Black farmers. I mean, everybody thinks it's more of a recent trend, but it's been going on for years and stuff like that. It just hasn't been getting the
some good things out of social media.
Right, yeah, exactly.
That you can now take a picture and put a hashtag behind it and
It's just a hashtag now. That's what it is. But now it's good for it, definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're at the end of Black History. We're at the start of Black History Month. We're at the end of January. Just to give us some homework, who are some people who we should celebrate, lift up, and study for Black History Month is in farming and in the farming agriculture industry.
Let's see.
I know you mentioned T.M. Campbell. I wrote him
Campbell.
down.
He's a good guy. Ooh, I could go on and on.
We want you to go on and on. We celebrate in culture here.
Let's see. Of course, George Washington Carver is one everybody knows. What's the guy that made figured out how to make the vanilla extract?
Oh, you got none.
Yeah, man. If I knew you asked, I would have had a list of them.
But he made the what?
Figured out how to bring out the vanilla extract from the plant.
Oh, from the plant.
Yeah. Sweet Jesus. Booker T. Whately, he's good.
Okay.
Booker T. Whately. Booker T. and then Whately, WHATLEY.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
And then I saw the Jessup wagon. I wrote that down.
yeah,
Because I need to look up the Jessup wagon to understand that better.
right. Let's see. Look at, ooh. I would have had a list of them.
Now I think this is really good. And who was T.M. Campbell? He was the first extension agent.
Right.
First extension agent. Yeah.
Yes.
So I do have some notes.
Oh yeah, just look at the good work at North Carolina A&T State University. It has that legacy
There we
of
go.
being a historically Black college that was dedicated to agriculture. Look at some of the great work they've done throughout in North Carolina. Ham and egg shows. Look those up.
Ham and egg shows?
Yeah, ham and egg shows. The early extension agents, they would do these programs in rural North Carolina with, and they, basically like a state fair. They bring, who could produce the best ham and stuff like that. You look at the honey baked ham, and that's what is believed that's where it came from.
Wow.
From those ham and egg shows. So like basically, Black people get together, raise pigs and stuff like that, and they would encourage them to eat eggs, stuff like that, because of high protein and healthier with low cholesterol, and they find the best ways to produce that. And it's kind of believed that's where the honey baked ham came from. One of those
Interesting.
days. Yeah, I had a friend of mine that did that research down at Fort Valley State, another 1890 land grant down in Georgia.
Wow. So we will definitely use North Carolina A&T as a resource and to learn a lot more about those land grant institutions. And think about it for homecoming, but don't actually think about it. They were important and essential to supporting African Americans at the start of learning how the best ways, like you said, research-based ways
Right.
of planting and farming. So that's really important. So do we have any questions before I ask my closing? So for the closing question is, what do you hope people learn and take away from hearing you speak today? So just a couple things that you want people to take away from learning about the extension agents, being an extension agent.
Number one, whatever county you're in North Carolina, call your extension office. Just Google what that county name is and put NCA Cooperative Extension behind it. Call them, go visit them, see the resource they have, look at those programs. Even if you're not farming, even if you don't have kids, just kind of see how you can participate in those programs, see how you can help out. If you're interested in any of those things, farming, beekeeping, starting a youth program, definitely contact, but go for it. Don't be afraid to do it. It's important to, our society depends on people that are just willing to go for it and make things happen. And it's not going to happen if you're not willing to, make it happen.
And we will close with that. Thank you so much, William.
All right,
Watch some live performances taking place throughout the day, screening on our website, nc-aacc.com. Thanks for joining us for the 21st Annual African American Cultural Celebration, which continues today until 5 p.m.